The night of your wedding felt less like a celebration of love and more like a formal transaction. The ballroom was filled with dazzling chandeliers, champagne floats, and hushed whispers of high society guests who cared more about Jungkook's empire than about your union. Jungkook stood tall in his perfectly tailored black suit, his expression unreadable, almost carved from marble. His hand rested lightly at the small of your back, but it wasn't the touch of a man cherishing his pride, it was the touch of a man maintaining appearances. The guests adored him, his employers spoke of his brilliance with trembling admiration, his investors respected his ruthlessness, and women envied you for being the one to marry him, but you knew better. The truth burned quietly inside your chest. You were not his partner, you were his obligation. Later that evening, as you entered the vast, cool mansion that was now your home, silence consumed the air between you. You stole a glance at him, trying to read even a flicker of warmth in his expression, but Jungkook was already shrugging off his blazer, loosening his tie as though the ceremony had drained him. You hesitated before breaking the silence. It was a beautiful ceremony. Jungkook's gaze flickered to you briefly, sharp and detached, before he replied in his low, collected tone. It was necessary. My father wanted this merger, and so did yours. Don't mistake it for anything else. The words settled heavy in your chest, harsher than any physical wound. You tried to shallow the sting, forcing a small, polite smile because that was what was expected of you. Of course, I didn't expect otherwise. Shuluk's jaw flexed as he looked at you, almost as if searching for resistance. But when you gave him none, he turned away. Good. At least you are realistic. This arrangement will stay professional. In public, he will play the role of my wife and you will do it flawlessly. Privately, he will stay out of my way. The finality in his voice left no room for argument. You stood there, your wedding dress still cascading around you like a reminder of promises that would never be fulfilled. That night, when you finally slept into bed, Jungkook didn't join you. He chose the study instead, leaving you staring at the ceiling, questioning how you had become nothing more than a decoration beside him. The days that followed were no different. At company events, his hand rested on your waist, his lips brushed your temple when cameras flashed, and his smiles appeared practiced yet to outsiders. You were the picture of perfection. But when the doors closed and the crowd faded, his silence swallowed you whole. He barely spoke to you unless it was about appearances. Dinner was eaten in silence, your attempts at conversation brushed aside with cold responses. One evening, you gathered the courage to try again. He was in his office, working late as always, the glow of his laptop reflecting against his sharp features. You work too much, don't you ever get tired? He didn't look up, fingers typing relentlessly. His voice was detached. Work doesn't betray. People do. I'd rather keep my focus where it belongs. You frowned, stepping closer. I'm not your enemy. Jungkook, you don't even try to know me. This time his eyes lifted, dark and cold, pinning you in place. Because knowing you is unnecessary, don't push where you are not needed. Why? The sharpness of his words lies deeper than he would ever know. That was the night you finally understood you were not his wife, not truly. You are his business alliance, his facade of stability, his silent shadow, a name beside him, nothing more. It begins subtly like an itch under your skin you couldn't ignore. Her name was Selene, elegant, composed, and effortlessly confident. She was the kind of woman who could walk into a crowded room and instantly draw attention, not because she demanded it, but because she carried herself as if the world was hers. And to Jungkook, she practically was. She was the only woman who could make his cold facade melt into the faintest of smiles. The only women he let into his office without appointment, no matter how late. The only women who could lean casually against his desk, flipping through his documents as though they belonged to her. You saw it all, silently from the corner of rooms where you were invisible. At first, you tried to rationalize it. She's just a friend. He trusts her. That's all. But trust was something you had never been given. One afternoon, you brought lunch to his office, thinking perhaps a small gesture might bridge the miles of silence between you. You had prepared it yourself. A rare attempt to insert yourself into his world, but as you entered, Celine was already there, perched on the edge of his desk, her laughter tinkling like glass as Jungkook leaned back in his chair, lips curved faintly in amusement. For a moment, you stood frozen in the doorway, clutching the lunchbox like a fool. Celine was the first to notice you, her eyes sharp and calculating beneath their practiced warmth. Flickered over you, a smirk ghosted across her lips before she spoke. Oh, Wine, you're here. How sweet. The way she said it made sweet sound like pathetic. Jungkook glanced at you briefly, then back at Celine, his amusement untouched. What is it? You swallowed, stepping forward. I thought you might want to eat something. You have been skipping meals. You placed the box on his desk, but before he could respond, Celine leaned forward, peeking at it. Homemade? That's adorable, but Jungkook hardly eats these things. He's too used to proper meals, or not you? Her tone was light, but her eyes glittered with malice. You waited for Jungkook to defend you, to say something, anything. But instead, he chuckled softly, a sound you had never been able to draw from him. She's right, you didn't need to trouble yourself, Vine. The dismissal was sharper than a blade. You forced a small smile, your heart sinking. Of course, I'll keep that in mind. Celine's smirk widened. She leaned closer to him, whispering something that made him laugh outright, a sound that left you breathless, because you realized you had never been the reason for it. And in that moment, standing there unseen, you understood the cruel truth. Jungkook's warmth, his rare, precious smiles, were never meant for you. They belonged to Celine. The storm began with a single mistake, a critical file mishandled. Celine had been the one responsible. In her carelessness, she forwarded the wrong set of documents to a high profile client. Within hours, the client's furious call reached Jungkook, shaking the entire floor. Celine knew what it meant. Admitting her fault would crack the perfect image she had built for herself in his eyes, and Celine wasn't the type to let her throne slip. So she acted. That evening, she walked straight into Jungkook's office. He was facing behind his desk, jaw tight with anger, tie pulled loose. Selene shut the door behind her, her heels clicking softly against the marble as she approached. Jungkook, I think I know what happened with the file. His sharp gaze snapped to her. Tell me. She hesitated, eyes lowering just enough to look timid, though every word she spoke was calculated. I shouldn't say this, but Wine was in the office yesterday when the report was open. She asked questions about the client, and I thought it was harmless. But maybe she moved something by mistake. She probably didn't realize how sensitive it was. Jungkook froze, his jaw clenching. Celine continued carefully, her tone laced with just the right balance of reluctance and false loyalty. I know she means well, but you always told her not to interfere in your work. Maybe this will teach her gently, of course. Her eyes lifted to meet his, wide and innocent, hiding the dagger behind her lips. Jungkook's expression hardened, his fury needed a target, and Celine had just handed him one. When you were summoned to his office later, you walked in unaware of the storm you were about to face. Jungkook stood waiting, his knuckles white against the edge of his desk. The file lay open before him like damning evidence. Do you even understand what you have done? Your brows knitted in confusion. I don't understand. What are you talking about? She snapped the file shut with a harsh thud, his eyes blazing. Don't insult my intelligence once. Celine told me you were handling this file. You sent the wrong document to the client, and now I'm left cleaning up your mess. Your heart dropped, Celine. She had. You opened your mouth to defend yourself, but fear clawed at your throat. I didn't. The denial barely escaped before his palm struck across your cheek. The sound reverberated in the silence, searing itself into your memory forever. The sting made your eyes water, but no tears fell, not here, not in front of him. I warned you never to meddle in my work. Do you think being my wife gives you the right to jeopardize everything I have built? Don't test my patience again. You pressed a trembling hand to your cheek, words choking in your throat. You wanted to scream the truth that Celine was laying, that you never touched that file, but his fury left you frozen. His reputation for merciless temper gauging your voice, so you lowered your gaze, swallowing the pain whole. I understand. And with that, you were dismissed, like a servant scolded for breaking a dish. Behind you, Jungkook exhaled sharply, muttering under his breath, pathetic. The word followed you out of the office, branding itself into your skin more deeply than the slap ever could. That night, you stood before the mirror in your room, the faint red mark still etched across your skin. You traced it with your fingers, the ache pulsing under your touch, and for the first time in your life, you felt hollow. You didn't cry, crying would have been release, and there was no release for what you carried. Instead, you swallow the humiliation whole, pushing it down where it gnawed at you quietly. Every time you closed your eyes, the sound replayed, the sharp crack of his palm against your cheek, his voice laced with venom the way he hadn't even cared enough to hear you. For nights, you avoided your reflection. You hid the bruise under layers of makeup when you attended public events beside him. Smiling for the cameras while your heart felt like a cage of broken glass, Jungkook never mentioned it again. He never asked if you were hurt, never apologized. To him, it was discipline and lesson delivered. Case closed. His coldness didn't falter. He carried on with his work, with Selene, with his empire, and you carried on with your silence. But has a weight and it was slowly suffocating you. The change was subtle at first. Weird once you would have met his sharp remarks with quiet defense, a wise pro, a mere retort. Now you offered nothing. No fire, no resistance, not even the faintest trace of disappointment, only silence. At dinners, you no longer asked how his day had been. He sat across the table, eyes downcast, pushing food around your plate while he ate in silence. When he returned home late, you no longer waited up with light burning in the living room. You were simply absent, lost in your own quiet world, and it unsettled him. One evening, Jungkook walked into the mansion past midnight, expecting the faint smell of tea or the low hum of the television. Instead, the house was blanketed in eerie quiet. You found your sleep on the couch, still in your work. Clothes, exhaustion written across your delicate features. For the first time in years, something twisted in his chest. He crouched near you, brushing a stray hair from your forehead. But when your eyes fluttered open, there was no warmth, no startled affection, only a polite note as though he were a guest entering in your space. You are late. Your tone was even, detached, not excusing, not caring, just stating effect. Jungkook froze, head retracting as though your voice had burned him. At the office, the cracks widened. It was during a quarterly meeting with the board when the truth began to unravel. Jungkook was reviewing documents when his eyes caught an inconsistency. A set of figures didn't match, numbers had been manipulated. He looked up sharply. Who prepared this? The room fell into uncomfortable silence. Finally, one of the junior managers spoke. It came through Selene, sir, she authorized it. Selene, who sat confidently beside Jungkook, paled for a fraction of a second before quickly regaining composure. There must be some mistake. Maybe the junior staff forwarded the wrong file again. These things happen, but Jungkook's eyes were already narrowing. He remembered the last time such a mistake had happened. Celine had insisted it was you. He had believed her without question. And now, staring at her carefully poised face, unease glared at him. After the meeting, he called her into his office. Tell me the truth, Celine. Did you alter those figures? She smiled, calm and polished. Jungkook, you know me better than that. Do you really think I would risk your company's integrity? You are letting stress cloud your judgment. But this time, Her confidence grated against him. He watched her too closely, noticing the flicker of her eyes, the stiffness in her posture. She wasn't untouchable, she wasn't perfect. And in that moment, realization turned like ice water in his veins. He had been played. Celine had lied before about you, about the file, about everything. That night, you could return home earlier than usual. He found you sitting by the window, a book in your lap, though you hadn't turned a page in a long while. You didn't look up when he entered, and the silence between you stretched unbearably. Wine, your eyes lifted slowly, guarded, detached, yes, for the first time in a long time. He hesitated, the words caught in his throat. Apologize didn't come easily to a man like him, a man who had been worshipped for his power, feared for his temper, respected for his brilliance, but never questioned. Yet now, standing in front of you with your distant gaze, slicing you more deeply than your anger ever could, Jungkook realized something had shifted. And he didn't know if it was already too late. Jungkook had never been a man to hesitate. In boardrooms, his voice was law. In business, his decisions were final. But now, as he stood outside the bedroom door, your bedroom where you had long since stopped waiting for him, his hand lingered on the knob for too long. Inside, you sat at the vanity, removing the last of your jewelry. The silence was thick, unbothered by his presence. Even when he stepped in, you didn't rise, you didn't even look at him. Chungo cleared his throat, his voice low and steady in a way you had never heard before. Wine, I need to speak with you. You finally turned your eyes calm, detached, as if you were regarding a stranger about Selene. The name made him flinch. He nodded once, jaw tight. It was her. She was the one behind the mistake. She framed you and I. His voice cracked, heavy with shame. I believed her. I didn't even let you speak. I was wrong. He stood closer, almost desperately. I should have trusted you. I should have. You raised your hand, silencing him with quiet grace. Stop. The word was soft, but it cut sharper than a blade. He stood, meeting his gaze fully for the first time in weeks. There was no fire in your eyes, no bitterness, no trembling fear. Just calm resolve. You don't need to explain. I already knew the truth. The day you raised your hand against me, I understood exactly where I stood in your life. His chest tightened. Why? You didn't let him speak. Your voice, steady and dignified, carried the weight of years of silence. You never respected me, not once. From the moment we married, I was just a name beside you, someone to smile for cameras and sit quietly at your side. You laughed with Celine, trusted her while you dismissed me like a nuisance. And when it mattered most, you didn't give me the chance to defend myself. He closed his eyes, guilt written across his features, but you pressed on. That slap didn't just bruise my skin, Chunguk. It shattered one hour thread of trust I had left in you. And no apology, no sudden realization can erase that. For the first time in his life, Chunguk looked small. His voice dropped to a whisper. I don't want to lose you. You gave him a faint smile, one of quiet strength you already have. The next morning, the mansion felt different, lighter. Your suitcase stood by the door, not heavy with belongings but with freedom. Jungkook stood at the foot of the staircase, watching as you descended with quiet poise. His hand twitched at his side as if he wanted to reach for you to beg, but his pride and your dignity made it impossible. When you stopped before him, there was no venom in your voice, only truth. You built an empire, Jungkook, but you never built a home. I won't live in a place where fear replaces love and silence replaces respect. I choose myself. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For a man who always had words sharp enough to cut, he found himself empty. You picked up your suitcase, your head held high, and walked past him. The heavy doors of the mansion closed behind you. The sound echoing like finality, and Jungkook hissed her frozen in the emptiness of his grand home, realizing for the first time what true loss felt like, not a failed tale. Not a ruined contract, but the absence of the one person who had once been his. If only he had known how to cherish her. From the window, he watched your figure disappear down the long driveway, his chest hollow, his hand pressed against the glass as though that could bring you back, but you never came back. Because this time you were not living in silence, you were living in strength. The grand hall was silent except for the echo of your heels against marble. Jungkook blocked your path one last time, his expression caught between desperation and command. Why don't do this? You're my wife. You laughed, low, bitter, and shaken. Wife, you only remembered that word when I decided to walk away. Until then, I was nothing more than a shadow in your house. And paper, don't insult me by calling me something you never treated me as. His jaw tightened. You think leaving makes me strong? You think the word out, they will protect you like I did. Your smirk was sharp enough to cut. Protect me. You were the danger, Jungkook. I was safer alone in a room full of strangers than beside you. The words hit him like bullets. His temper flared, eyes narrowing, fists clenching. Enough wine, but you stepped closer, your voice steady, merciless. No, Chungu, you don't get to silence me anymore. You humiliated me, mistrusted me, raised your hand against me all while smiling at Selene like she was your word. And now you want me to stay because your ego can't handle the loss. You leaned in, your last words a quiet dagger, but I'm not your possession. I was never your toy and I'll never be your second choice. You pushed past him, suitcase in hand, leaving him stunned, his fury and shame burning through his veins. The moment the mentioned door slammed shut, Chungkook's composure snapped. He stormed into his office, where Selene launched with her usual smug smile, as though nothing had changed. She will be back, Chungkook, woman like her always. The crack of his hand across her cheek silenced her instantly. The sound echoed like thunder. Because of you, I lost her. You poisoned her name in my mind. You made me doubt her, and I was fool enough to listen. Celine's eyes widened, tears welling, but Jungkook's fury was unrelenting. You think you want Celine? You think I'll turn to you now that she's gone? Never. All you have done is destroy the only thing that ever mattered to me. His hand shook as he dragged it through his hair, his chest heaving. The cold, controlled mafia boss was gone. In his place stood a man consumed by loss and fury. Get out, I never want to see your face again. Celine, pale and trembling, stumbled out of the office, leaving Jungkook alone in the suffocating silence of his empire. Outside those gilded gates, you breathed freely for the first time in years. The word of chains you hadn't even realized you carried was finally gone. You didn't look back, not once. Behind you, Jungkook stood at the window, his figure shadowed against the fading light. For the first time, the man who once ruled with fear and cold authority now tasted what it meant to truly lose. And you walked forward with your head high, every step echoing the truth you had chosen, your self respect over his cold half love.